Join me, Mark Windows, for Windows on the World live every Sunday 9 to 11 PM GMT. Check out our archive and programme stream at windowsontheworld.net. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Windows on the World. We're going to carry on this week with our theme, the Hive Mind, as there's such a lot of it about. In fact, it's infectious. It's everywhere. We've done quite a lot of shows on this subject, but people are being pushed into totalitarianism or being left out of it. And that's what a lot of this stuff's about, really. Last week's show, The Global Hive Mind, the kind of write-up for that was it encompasses pretty much all public opinion and engagement, from the globalist-backed anti-globalists, which is Extinction Rebellion at the moment, to the takeover of the public narrative. This show looks at the more ludicrous aspects of the manufactured hive mind. So we're going to carry on this week with more of that and more, actually, because we're going to carry on with the Cambridge spies. We talked about how people were being recruited from these so-called elite universities, Oxford and Cambridge, and the background of that we're going to get into this week with the spying programs that came out of there in the 60s and previous to that even. But we're on a roll with the Hive Mind project. But first of all, I got a great quote here, and it just perfectly sums up what's going on at the moment. This is from Alice in Wonderland. Alice laughed. "There's no use trying," she said. "One can't believe impossible things." "I dare say you haven't had much practice," said the Queen. "When I was younger, I always did it for half an hour a day. Why, sometimes I believed as many as 6 impossible things before breakfast." I wonder if she knew about the BBC. Interesting that, isn't it? But that's really where we are. But before we get into the show, I would like to tell you about our forthcoming talks on the bigger picture, featuring myself, Piers Corbyn and Sandy Adams. Next Sunday, the 15th of September, 11 a.m. to 5 p.m, we're at Singleton Village Hall, 6 The Lays, Singleton, Chichester, West Sussex. PO180HR. Contact Janie Steele, JANIESTILL at sky.com. It's £10 for the whole day. Janie got on to me yesterday and she said there's been lots of interest, but that doesn't mean that we don't want more interest. We want as much interest as possible. So do come down to that if you're in the area in West Sussex, known as Chichester. On September the 21st, we're at Saffron Walden Village Hall in Debden, 11 a.m. to 6 p.m. There's a free car park there, so bring your cars. It's £10 for the whole day. Please email debdenbiggerpicture@gmail.com for further information. And there's an Eventbrite bookings page on windowsontheworld.net, and it's going around Facebook at the moment. Saturday, 12th of October, we're in St Dogmiles Hall, Maes Hyfryd, St Dogmiles, Pembrokeshire, SA43 3ES. That's £10 for the whole day again. stdogmiles.co.uk. They're all on the website, by the way, folks, and you get all the links there. But I thought I would tell everybody else about them too. 14th of October, Natural Law in a Post-Truth World. That's me, Mark Windows, at New Horizons, Lytham St Anne's, near Blackpool. Truth and facts are contrary to the current post-truth world. Isn't that the truth? The role of natural law in combating the now entirely corrupted and ever more controlling system can bring remedy. I'm going to share some of my remedies and some of the comedy remedies that I've had over the years. Because it's not all misery, this, you know. There is a lot of comedy gold to be had. And we're going to get onto that a bit later, actually. I've been trawling the Guardian begging pages again, and we have some comedy gold from that coming up. Saturday 9th of November, we're actually in Brighton. Now, we had a gig pulled in Brighton by Fuller's pub down there. Full details are actually in an article on windowsontheworld.net, and it's called UK Venues Who Hate Truth. We've got to use the H word, you see, because they're just, all this they're doing is they're pointing their hate at us, and we're just trying to get everyone together. We're trying to bring the community together, you know. But basically, it's very interesting, this, because one of the UK venues who hate truth, well, they are a charitable trust, and they've really messed up. They're called the Hamblin Trust. And we fulfilled all of their charitable objectives with our public interest talks. So why don't they want us there? They accepted the booking and then they cancelled it, causing enormous inconvenience to us and the lady who booked us there. So you can hear the telephone call I made to the Hamblin Trust in that article and on the front page of windowsontheworld.net. So that article is called UK Venues Who Hate Truth. So yes, have a look at that. And why don't you ask them, people out there? Why don't you give them a call and ask them why they don't like truth, why they ban public interest events which fulfill their charitable objectives, and ask them why their trustees failed to respond to my inquiry and phone call, even after I was told that the trustees would contact me. This is arrogance above and beyond their position as public trustees. I even had Lord Ashcroft, Chair of Trustees of the charity at home, Crime Stoppers, do work behind the scenes when I contacted him. He acted accordingly and pulled hundreds of people off Crime Stoppers. You can also see that on the front page of Windows on the World. So, wait a minute. If public trustees have to act accordingly, why aren't they doing it? Why don't you ask them? Phone up the Hamblin Centre. It's 01243 572 109. That's 01243 572 109. Their website is thehamblincenter.org.uk, and do have a look at the article and spread it round. We need to start naming and shaming these venues that are shutting down public interest events in this country. Good idea, isn't it? Now, this is from Richard. He's just sent this to me. He's one of the listeners to the show, and he was in Amsterdam and he saw this poster, which is basically about not having babies. They're telling you not to have babies on this poster. And he looked it up, and it was actually from a website called thegreatdecrease.com, thegreatdecrease.com. And basically what Richard says was, well, the city itself resembles a scene from Demolition Man. There's signs everywhere saying drinking in the street, €90 fine, littering, €180 fine, cashless is everywhere. He says apparently the old mayor died a couple of years ago and the new female mayor is driving a lot of it. Well, of course, because a useful idiot's been brought in, haven't they? But this is quite interesting. If you look at this website, thegreatdecrease.com, you couldn't make this up. This is so sinister. It says, we have become numerous. We have become numerous. That's you and me. Well, that's basically Europeans. We have become numerous. Well, actually, the European birth rate is falling. So why do they want to decrease it? Because we've got replacement migration from the UN Migration Compact, which all the people who read the fake leftist media in the UK and beyond think is a right-wing conspiracy theory. But it's not actually. It's in the UN documentation. But they think that's a conspiracy theory as well. It says, we have become numerous. Our species has more than doubled in the last 50 years. They're calling us our species. It's all quite sinister, isn't it? It's beyond Brave New World, this. I mean, are they talking about the epsilons here? Or are they talking about people in general? Our species has more than doubled in the last 50 years. Today, more than 7.6 billion people are living on Earth. Now, that's just an estimate. In fact, that's worth looking into because these figures are possibly not too accurate. It says, and the United Nations, speak of the devil, and the United Nations predict that by 2050, over 10 billion humans will populate the Earth. Now, the United Nations have an uncanny ability to get their predictions 100% wrong 100% of the time. How do they manage to do that? It says, the large number of people is the driving force behind today's major problems. Again, a huge assumption and a logical fallacy. The large number of people being packed into cities is the driving force behind a lot of problems which are being introduced as part of a social engineering program. It didn't say that though. It says including climate change, here we go, loss of biodiversity and scarcity of resources. Well, artificial scarcity of resources, which is where the Agenda 2030 plans come in. That's the whole point of it. I was looking today about the privatisation of water in Australia. I might mention that a bit later on. But look at the Darling Basin in Australia. See what's happened out there. That is a great example of artificial scarcity. Self-irrigating farmers and their farms are being put out of business, bankrupted, they're committing suicide because the water supply has been privatised. And privatisation brings in, guess what? Artificial scarcity. It's a business plan, folks. That's all it is. It's just a good business plan. People pay more for things that are scarce, don't they? However, it carries on. Reason for the great decrease, to open up the conversation about this exponential growth of the world population and its consequences. They're saying that's the reason, this scarcity of resources, loss of biodiversity and climate change. Well, what's the weather got to do with it? A sensitive subject, it says, because who am I to tell you that you cannot have a child? Well, in actual fact, that's what the website's doing. So can you see the slight subversion going on here? It says, now get this, you're going to love this one. The next paragraph opens with, shrink towards abundance. Can you believe this? It's incredible, isn't it? This is newspeak and logical fallacies all thrown into one. It says, celebrate low birth rates. In an overpopulated world, having less children is the most pro-child action you can take. Let that one sink in for a minute. According to the Great Decrease, falling birth rates are a blessing. What, because they say so? Yeah, must be then. Therefore, we start an international campaign to encourage countries with low birth rates to celebrate this. Now, isn't that interesting? We encourage countries with low birth rates to celebrate this. So they're saying that the countries with the lowest birth rates, which are the Europeans, are the ones who should celebrate having even less children. Read it for yourselves. It's up there, ladies and gentlemen. The Great Decrease put up billboards in Portugal, it says here, with a 1.2 million birth rate. The country with the lowest birth rate in Europe is Portugal, apparently. Singapore with a birth rate of 1.3 and the Netherlands with a birth rate of 1.6. Well, thanks for sending that in. And I think everyone should have a look at that website, because some of the rhetoric that they're using on there is beyond Brave New World. It's called thegreatdecrease.com. And it's a very sparse website. There's not much on it. But again, it's a hive mind idea that they want everybody to implant into their hive mind. But I want to say thanks now to Sen for sending in a very good analysis of the Common Core education system. I got this today. Now, it's a really interesting thing. It's on YouTube. I think I might post it onto the website, actually. But the thing that really struck me about it, because I knew a lot of the stuff about Common Core, the destruction of history, the fragmenting of knowledge, etc. But did you know that in the United States secondary education system, that the scribblings of George Clooney get the same amount of learning time as the works of Mark Twain? They have 7 pages each in the curriculum. Can you believe this? Now, Clooney is the ideal perpetrator of propaganda. He has made millions out of being an establishment bootlicker and supporter of all subversive US activities. Everything that's wrong and against humanity, he supports, doesn't he? Including the White Helmets, these mercenaries in Syria. Well, as they say, crime pays, or in reality, mediocre liars do really well. He's got about 11 mansions in the US, this George Clooney. Yeah, Mr. Smug. Now, the thing is, as always, what you have to remember is that when these actors get up, when they haven't got a script, they just make absolute fools of themselves. Well, look at him, look at De Niro, look at any of them. Just look at any of them and what they've got to say. Angelina Jolie, whatever she's called, all of them, basically all of them. Sean Penn, it doesn't matter, just name one. They all make absolute fools of themselves. You know, isn't it a shame Robert Mitchum's not alive anymore? I think he would have broken the mould. Well, I like to think so anyway. But it's always great to look at the comments, basically, right? Advertising the UK Guardian as journalism. I'm just going to get onto this now. This is really funny. So the UK Guardian are always begging for money and subscriptions. And somebody put in a really good joke, which actually caught my attention. I'm going to repeat it. It said, "The Guardian has a circulation marginally greater than the Racing Post, but with 4 times as many losers in it." Now, I would dispute that and say there's probably 10 times as many losers in the Guardian than in the Racing Post on a daily basis. But it was a great example of the hive mind, looking at the responses that you get from the 10% of people posting who are in favour of the Guardian. Now, their readers spew out the same crap that's in the paper. This is completely hive mind. So basically, the logical fallacies, the lies and the ad hominems that they use in the Guardian are all used by their readers. So they're just one hive mind. And this is my favourite Guardian reader logical fallacy of the week, because I said something about cultural Marxism. And this idiot goes that cultural Marxism was a conspiracy theory because someone who wrote for the New Zealand Herald had said so. And he named this guy from the New Zealand Herald as though he was the authority on the fact that cultural Marxism didn't exist. I mean, this is brilliant stuff. It's a logical fallacy wrapped in comedy gold, you know. But they said that the Institute of Social Research, which is where cultural Marxism was born, were just academics, and they were basically sad losers. But sad losers control the narrative for the people who use them. Basically, that's the truth, isn't it? They're a diversion away from the original statement. You know, that's all they're doing here. They divert away from what you've said. And every time I go on these posts where the Guardian's asking for money, I get such brilliant responses that I should make a note of them more often. They're all pretty much the same, but I thought this was great. But, you know, when you're up against the small thinker. Now, this is the thing as well, right? Now, the interesting thing about thought process is the people who are in charge of everything, who these people think don't exist and are part of some big conspiracy theory, they think big. But the people who mentor themselves into this hive mind thinking think really small. And that's what's one of the big difference between globalists and anti-globalists, actually. I'm talking about this as a big general thing, that people who make these big decisions are thinking big. And these people who think really small and are so restricted in the way they think, they can't imagine that anybody could think big, which I think is incredibly funny. And that's a point that I think is really important when you're addressing this sort of hive mind. But the interesting thing about thought processes, the propagandized hive mind always thinks small. Now, before we carry on, I wanted to mention, I did a podcast with a chap called Richard Willits, and he's got a site on YouTube. It's called, his channel on YouTube is called A Glitch in the Code. And I did a really interesting interview with Richard. We got onto some very, very related topics to what we talk about on the show, but we went in a slightly different direction. And have a listen to that. You might find it interesting. And also let me know what you think of the interview, because we got into areas where I want to take the show in the future, really. In a way, areas that we've already covered. Going into more of the supernatural and these aspects of consciousness and reality. I'm not talking about New Age kind of consciousness and reality here. I'm talking about the parapsychology, the exploration of this stuff through basically scientific research, or as scientific research as is possible. But those propagandized constantly come from a young age. It's basically, we're going to get onto that. The younger they get them, this is the old Soviet system, the better. And when the people are propagandized from a young age, they'll defend their mental imprisonment to the death. Now, this is the same in all totalitarian systems throughout history. Just look it up. It's an interesting subject, this. Propaganda, though, has to contain truth. And as we said last week, now it doesn't. The propaganda doesn't contain any truth. Therefore, it has no effect. It only has an effect on those who are bought into it and totally indoctrinated. Otherwise, it can't have an effect. It can't really bring new people on board if it doesn't contain a mixture of truth and lies. But we get on now to the fourth world, which was described as the wilderness of the mind. We talked about this last week with this Gail Bradbrook taking psychedelics and how it would be basically used to enforce this social engineering and propaganda through the Gaia religion using mind-altering substances. We've done loads of shows on this. Look at our show, New Age Global Governance. But basically, it's all social engineering. So when you look at it, the minds of Gail Bradbrook and this Roger Hallam are a wilderness. There's not a brain cell in sight. They're just an empty void. They do just what it said they would do in 1992 at the Rio Earth Summit. And we've covered this. Look at that. The article and the show's New Age Global Governance. It's really, really interesting stuff. And I wanted to get on to really this information which follows on from last week. And it's all about the use of psychedelics, which is what Extinction Rebellion are now pushing on behalf of the globalists. So the globalists said around 1950, there was an ambitious project which was launched by the Tavistock Institute of Human Relations and through the United States for the massive LSD intoxication of the population of the United States and beyond. Aldous Huxley, who spearheaded the Tavistock LSD project, was the grandson of Thomas H. Huxley, one of the founders of the Rhodes Round Table Group. Listeners to the show may know this. Huxley had been tutored by H.G. Wells, that vocal proponent of the open conspiracy, and was a long-term collaborator with Arnold Toynbee, a 50-year member of the Royal Institute of International Affairs, as well as the head of the British Intelligence Research Division. Now, we have things that are equal to that today, like the Research Information Communications Unit. So these sort of Soviet-type sounding government organisations that we're talking about here, we've got them and more in abundance these days. They're in abundance, you know. So it says, to grasp Toynbee's politics in 1971, he stated that a Bolshevik dictatorship of the world was necessary before a benevolent one world order could be instituted, which is exactly what's happening now. The iron fist is still in the velvet glove, but when it comes off, it will be sudden. It carries on. The new Tavistock project was intended to inject a euphoria-producing chemical on a widespread basis in America. Huxley's purposes in the dissemination of LSD in the United States may have been betrayed in the following statement. Get this. Now let us consider another kind of drug, still undiscovered, but probably just around the corner. A drug capable of making people happy in situations where they would normally feel miserable. Such a drug would be a blessing, but a blessing fraught with grave political dangers. By making a harmless chemical euphoric freely available, a dictator could reconcile an entire population to a state of affairs to which self-respecting human beings ought not to be reconciled. Elsewhere, Huxley stated it more succinctly. There will be, in the next generation or so, a pharmacological method of making people love their servitude and producing a kind of painless concentration camp for entire societies. Now, finally, it says here, if there is any doubt about Huxley's beliefs in Brave New World Revisited, he stated, the 21st century will be the era of the world controllers. The older dictators fell because they could never supply their subjects with enough bread, enough circuses, enough miracles and mysteries. Under a scientific dictatorship, education will really work, with the result that most men and women will grow up to love their servitude and will never dream of revolution. There seems to be no good reason why a thoroughly scientific dictatorship should ever be overthrown. I believe that. Hang on a minute, I'm going to cut in here because this is Riley's view, who was part of this basically Cambridge group of spies, which included Anthony Blunt, Guy Burgess. And Riley's view may be gauged, it says, by a letter he wrote to Lockhart's father, who was another of these people, Bruce Lockhart, who'd set up a Soviet spy group at Trinity College. Riley's view may be gauged by a letter he wrote to Lockhart's father on the subject of Bolshevism. He said, I believe that it is bound by a process of evolution to conquer the world. as Christianity and the ideas of the French Revolution have done before it, and that nothing, least of all violent reactionary forces, can stem its ever-rising tide. The much decried and so little understood Soviets, which are the outward expression of Bolshevism, as applied to practical government, are the nearest approach I know of to a real democracy based upon true social justice. Get that? True social justice. Where have we heard that before? And that they may be destined to lead the world to the highest ideal of statesmanship, internationalism, which is exactly what's happened and what we're going through now. Doesn't matter what you call it, this is bigger than communism, and we've done a show on that too. Check out the shows we did about the new barbarians, Dr. Richard Day. That's very interesting stuff. It's hearsay, but it's very interesting hearsay, and it's all come true. Before we carry on, I also wanted to read this. It's something that was sent to me about the Maldives. It was sent to me by Jamie. So thanks, Jamie, for sending this in. Now, we've all heard that the Maldives are going to be under the sea. Yet they've built a new smart city which looks like an absolute prison of skyscrapers on the Maldives. Now, the whole point of what we were saying years ago was that the reason a lot of these islands are sinking is because they're building on coral. So obviously the UN and their Smart Cities project doesn't really mind about its projections of rising sea levels. So who's telling the truth here? Interesting one. Take a look at one of our shows, Sea Level Expert versus Climate Lies, featuring Niels Axel Morner, who's actually one of the world's leading expert in sea levels. So, yeah, moving swiftly on, we're going to go to the BBC now and our weekly update from, yes, David Attenborough and Greta Thunberg.
Mayday, mayday, mayday. Climate emergency. I know it's turned out nice again, but worse is to come. Welcome to Climate Matters with me, Sir David Attenborough. I like that bit, Sir. Yes. Today I'm reporting on the journey of Greta Thunberg, who is proving that the climate emergency is real by sailing instead of flying. And of course
David, that's a logical fallacy. Just because Greta sails instead of flying doesn't prove that there is a climate emergency. Are you thick or something?
Oh, Greta, you're Greta's sister, aren't you? How are you?
I'm stalking you until you stop lying, like my sister lies, like the UN lies. You better stop lying, David, or this won't stop.
I will continue to report the findings of the IPCC and indeed the BBC on this, the sixth mass extinction.
No one is going extinct, except your audience. Do you know how many TV licenses have been cancelled since 2017? More than 860,000 TV licenses were cancelled in 2017-18 compared to 798,000 in 2016-17. That's according to figures obtained by The Times, by the way.
That's too much information for me. The media is the message, and we broadcast all over the world. Media Matters and BBC Media Action infiltrates. We have advocates in most countries around the world.
Yeah, they infiltrate and interfere. That's why that woman was put in prison in Iran.
At a time when people have begun to talk about Earth's climate emergency.
What emergency?
It is understood that climate change is already happening in the countries in which BBC Media Action works. Our communities are already experiencing increasingly powerful droughts.
No more than usual. And they are not your communities. They are other people's. Get out, you globalist communist scum!
Flooding and extreme weather are all
There has been no increase in extreme weather events in 100 years, according to the IPCC, who wouldn't know a fact if he turned up at their conference and bought them all dinner.
The poorest people are the ones who feel the impact of this increasingly variable weather most. and who find it hardest to recover.
You are interfering in the governance of other nations. Everyone's check out media action, the BBC infiltrating and subverting countries all over the world with their fake agendas on fake climate mitigation.
So until next week, remember, climate matters. We love you, Greta, and bon voyage.
Are you trying to wind me up? That spoilt sister of mine will get to know the truth when she gets home from sailing around the world. The emergency services have called the police on her. She keeps saying our house is on fire, and it isn't. Stop lying, Greta. There will be big trouble when you get home.
Bon voyage, au revoir, Greta. And that's it from me, David Actabor, and this edition of Climate Matters.
That's not it from me, Greta Thunderbird, the not-so-secret sister of the mini pigtail dictator. She is in such big trouble when she gets back to Sweden.
Thank you also, Greta Thunderbird, sister of Greta.
Communist scum! Off our streets! Communist scum! Off our streets!
Whose streets?
Our streets!
Whose streets?
Our streets!
Whose streets?
Our streets!
That was our weekly update there from David Actabor and the great Greta Thunderbird, their sister of the world's finest climate activist and expert yachtswoman, and of course the preeminent advisor to the United Nations and the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change and governments around the world. So honoured to have her sister on the show there. And our next item or article is again from the BBC, and it actually features our friend Sir David. Get this, the teaching of creationism could creep in to schools under Wales' new curriculum. That's Wales, as in the country, in the new Welsh curriculum. Scientists have said, I love it when scientists have said now is about as convincing as experts say, isn't it? What did they do? Ask one of the dinner ladies. Well, dinner ladies, nothing wrong with them. They do know a bit more than David Actabor, actually, I would think. But Sir David Actabor, it says, has intervened and called for a ban on teaching pseudoscience in schools. Now, can you get over the irony of this? He is going on about pseudoscience when everything he says is not even pseudoscience, it's just barefaced lies. This is incredible, isn't it? It says a letter signed by 46 individuals and organisations, including Sir David Attenborough, asked the Welsh Government to explicitly ban the teaching of creationism as science. Organised by the campaign group Humanists UK, it also calls for primary school pupils to be taught about evolution. Now, it's interesting because a lot of 60s people who are a bit alternative and lefty are into this humanist thing. And basically, the whole idea of it is to stop people believing in anything spiritual. That's all it is, which is, when it comes down to it, one of the 10 planks of communism. When you look at it, it's the destruction of religious ideas and religion. So evolution, it says. Yes, it says evolution. The Welsh Government said it expects all pupils will be taught evolution. Now, evolution is a theory that has no evidence, and it was refuted by its creator, Charles Darwin, later in his life, because he said not a single species had evolved. And he refuted his own theory, and it was a theory. So they're saying all pupils will be taught evolution. Well, what about intervention theory? What about the fact that we're genetically modified and we have a fused chromosome? What about the fact that we're not adapted to our own environment? So how can we have evolved from creatures who are adapted to their environment? How did we devolve? How come the human race is getting more stupid? These are questions I think that should be asked. You know, it says the new curriculum due to be rolled out from September 2022. Sets out 6 broad areas of learning and experience, including science and technology. A draft version published in April sets out what matters in each area and is meant to give teachers flexibility to decide on the details of how they cover them. Oh yeah, right. But scientists, guess what? Wait for it, including Richard Dawkins. Why do they wheel this idiot out every single time that somebody gets into the idea of creationism versus evolution, which are both false paradigms, really. Creationism versus evolution. What's the synthesis to that? Yeah, intervention theory, or basically the middle ground. Let's look at something that is actually more to do with intelligent design, even though intelligent design has been absolutely derided because they then link it to creationism. So it's the usual ham-fisted crap propaganda, But basically, it's incredible, this, because the real issues are never talked about within the education system, which, of course, is the idea. The idea of education is to prevent change in the individual, which is, again, the theory and the subject and the practice of our shows about the hive mind. But get this. Next up, a new totalitarian brainwashing scheme was spotted this week. Well, we had a few of them last week, didn't we? But we've got a new one this week. Guess what it's called? Planet Children. Is this making you feel a bit uncomfortable and creeped out yet? Well, it will. It's a scheme to brainwash preschool kids at nursery. Preschool kids at nursery. Planet Children. From cradle to grave, the children of Gaia will obey all lobbyists who control the management of all infrastructure and beliefs. That was what I added to it, by the way. But that's kind of paraphrasing what's going on. Now, the site has a quote again from the TV presenter and actor David Attenborough. And it starts off, get this. He says, the question is, are we happy to suppose that our grandchildren may never be able to see an elephant except in a picture book? Well, if you're in a European country and not in an Asiatic country or Africa, then you're not going to see an elephant, are you, unless it's in a zoo. I didn't see an elephant in a natural habitat until I was well over 35, because I hadn't been to a country where elephants were roaming around. Now, the only place I'd seen an elephant roaming around before that was in a zoo in Manchester. So what is he talking about? We may never be able to see an elephant except in a picture book. Now, basically, what he's talking about is the extinction. And really what he should be saying here is that it's about ivory hunting. But he's going to say it's about climate change as usual. But basically, it says here, galvanising your nursery's whole early learning team into earth-friendly action now. Is this creepy enough for you? It carries on. It is easy to do, since transforming your nursery into a completely environmentally friendly community can be fun as well as rewarding. A few thoughtful adjustments will make a huge difference to the education and future of our youngest generation. Not only will the old habits that are destroying the planet be arrested in the nursery community, a whole new, fresh generation will learn to view eco-friendly practices as the norm. Yes, they're going to learn which bin to put their nappies in before they're 3 years old, boys and girls. Do you remember your nursery community? Do you remember your nursery community? Because I don't really remember mine. I don't really remember it being a community either. It wasn't environmentally friendly. In fact, it was environmentally unfriendly. It was incontinence central. Not for me, of course, because I never wet myself at all. Well, until I was 35, actually. I did that by accident. Here are just a few ideas that can be implemented immediately, like it says on the website. Offer staff, get this, just wait for this one, right? Offer staff extra holidays if they travel by train instead of by plane. Now, this should be illegal. This is beyond lobbying. This is totalitarianism. This is extreme. Offer staff extra holidays if they travel by train instead of by plane. What, to Spain? To Portugal? How are you going to get on a train to there? This is incredible. Provide monthly sustainable prizes for great environment-friendly teaching and learning. Encourage car sharing by introducing parents who live in neighbouring postcodes or ones en route to the nursery. And of course, guilt trip them about idling their engines or using their cars to drop the kids off if they haven't got more than 6 people in the car with them. Get this, now the lobbying starts. Join the World Wildlife Fund. Now, you don't think that the Global Action Plan is behind this, do you, by any chance? Join the World Wildlife Fund. the chief land-grabbing corporation of the UN, historically, was the World Wildlife Fund. It says, so staff can stay informed and know what we can all do to help. We've got to join the World Wildlife Fund so we can all help. Lobbying for land grabbing. Promotion of controlling lobbying groups. I mean, how can they do this? It says join the Woodland Trust or ask them for a few free trees for schools. Well, trees are free anyway, aren't they? I mean, anybody can plant a tree. It's not going to cost them anything. You don't have to go to the Woodland Trust. Now, what they're doing here is throwing in everything environmental, but mainly these lobbying groups. Now, the Woodland Trust basically do look after woodlands, but what they're going to be doing is getting kids to go into the woodlands and saying, well, you can't have your own. You can come into ours. You'll never be able to own any land. This is basically the mentoring program. It says, here's another lobbying one. Contribute to the number 4 ocean and receive monthly ocean recycled bracelets to use as target prizes. In other words, now you're going to be wearing your lobbyist stuff. You're going to be draping it all over your kids and yourself. More lobbying. It says get a bee saver kit for your nursery garden with wildflower seeds, garden planner, bee spotter and guide and postcards for bees available from, wait for it, ladies and gentlemen, you're not going to believe this one, Friends of the Earth. More lobbying. Use 2 different bins in each nursery room. Here we go. Don't put your nappies in that one. It's for cardboard. Use 2 different bins in each nursery room. One for non-recyclable waste, one for recyclable, and engage children so they use them accurately. This is an enforcement of totalitarianism. And basically, this is mind control of a most disgusting kind, really. It says upcycle all plastic. Do not throw it away and invent with it. Well, all kids do that, don't they? Yeah, get a plastic box, play with it. No. They'll all have their iPhones out. But it says minimize food waste. Use uncooked vegetable leftovers for your growing area compost or to feed your chickens. Now, how many chickens do you get in nursery school? And how many nursery school kids keep chickens? You know, your chickens, like everyone's got them, you know. Constantly ask managers and teams for their ideas and trial them too. This is basically Saul Alinsky rules. This is the big society we were talking about from 2010 onwards. Cameron's big society. You know, basically what they're doing is they are finding any outliers within the staff and targeting them, saying, what do you mean you're flying on a plane? Oh, you're not going to get extra days holiday. It's absolutely unbelievably totalitarian. It says, basically, yeah, Saul Alinsky rules. This is what they're using. Freeze the target, polarize it, and relentlessly attack it. This is in a nursery school. It's harassment of staff outside their job roles as well. It's really disgusting. It says link your nurseries to a local scrap project where clean, reusable items such as stationery and unwanted furniture are donated by businesses and can be sourced and reused by children in schools. Well, we've already got that, haven't we? It's called Free Cycle. Just people putting their stuff they don't want on the internet. But what's that got to do with 3-year-olds? I don't know many 3-year-olds who go on Free Cycle. They don't really need to, do they? It says, get this. We're now going to talk about what we talked about at the beginning of the show, the Common Core. A sustainable curriculum. A sustainable curriculum. Your nursery's sustainable curriculum is where all your team's aims and ideas about cutting back your plastic use and carbon footprint can be gathered together and made into a formidable force for good. It is a powerful, unifying dynamic which will quickly gather momentum among your nursery community. If committed to by all and implemented implicitly, again, if committed to by all, nobody will be left behind. In other words, you're not allowed to have your own opinion. You have to go with the hive mind. Otherwise, you're going to be cast out. This is how all totalitarian regimes, from Maoist communism to Bolshevism, whatever you want to call it, we're talking about something bigger than communism here, but the rules are pretty much the same. Totalitarian brainwashing program, only subservience will be accepted. It says, a sustainable curriculum not only gives your nursery's child the best opportunities to engage in wonderful immersive experiences. Did you have wonderful immersive experiences in nursery school? I know I did. It is a clear message to, this is great. Just stop for a minute and listen to this. It is a clear message to all your parents stakeholders, future parents, staff and children that you are all 100% committed to improving. It's not wrong to say saving our planet for our children's future. That's the mantra that they're implanting into the hive mind of the staff in these nurseries. It's wrong to use propaganda to brainwash 3-year-olds, in my opinion. But there you go. I'm not a Guardian reader. I'm an outlier. I'm sorry. I've been listening to right-wing conspiracy theories and right-wing think tanks. It says here, those nurseries which have already committed to being 100% eco-friendly are reporting how the change has become a unifying force between staff, parents and children, the hive mind, of all ages, beliefs and ethnic origin, who are all proud to be part of the mission. Global warming is a problem for everyone, and addressing it is a meaningful goal for all. No one will be left behind. The hive mind, the Stepford Wives, Brave New World. It's a bit of Soylent Green coming up as well. I can see that. Unbelievable. Another section of the site, though, has a title in the section called Eco Warriors. This is for a nursery school, right? Cheryl Hadland at Tops and Gecko has put a great idea into action. Try nominating a member of staff in each room who can keep an eye on the practice room. So they put a comma in there in the wrong place, actually. We'll get on to them about that. Details matter. Keep an eye on the practice room and on shared areas, and can tell them or tell the team any great sustainable changes that are needed for resourcing and energy use. It doesn't even make sense the way they've written it. They're totally illiterate. But basically, it's a gatekeeping dictator's been appointed to police the staff. A change agent's been brought in. They're probably all change agents in these places. I doubt you'd even get a job there if you weren't a change agent. It says carbon footprint equals your supply, use and waste of energy. Where does your energy come from? Is it clean energy? If not, can you change it? Then we get onto the green power section. The energy supplier recommended by climate change writers such as Mark Lucas is Green Energy UK. So they're lobbying all day long on this. And this is meant to be for nursery schools. It says Green Energy UK. Their energy is 100% renewable using solar, wind power and biofuel gas. Well, if you look at our show, The Green Energy Agenda, you'll see where the national grid actually gets its power from. It says they have no fixed contracts as they believe you choose them and will stay with them if you choose to. They're also very competitively priced and very helpful. So basically they're using this as a lobbying and advertising board for a totalitarian green energy agenda. It says Green Energy UK also have solar panel feed-in tariffs, FIT, which means you can save back the cost of installation by giving energy to the national grid and generate your own free energy. Well, there's people already doing that. Incredible, isn't it? But it goes on. Shell are also offering 100% renewable household energy through their company Shell Energy. But I thought the oil companies were fueling the fossil fuel industry, are fueling all this anti-globalist and anti-climate change stuff. You know, it's like they don't understand any of the way that this works. It's kind of incredible. It says our aim is to thrive through this energy transition by reshaping our company to provide the mix of lower carbon products. So they're bigging up Shell there as well. It's kind of funny. Give power, it says. Nappies and food waste can be turned into biofuel. Conserve power, take a quick audit and cut back where you can. Maybe use less fridges. How many fridges do you use in a nursery? But don't throw food away, of course, it says in brackets. Unplug things like chargers and always use LED light bulbs. In hot weather, try to leave off air conditioners and fans, open windows wide, keep blinds down and the curtains closed. I mean, this is incredible. This is like a dystopian nightmare. It says keep a calm atmosphere in the room and give children and staff access to plenty of water. What, is it working on the basis of a prison then? I think it is, isn't it? I don't know whether you've noticed this, but over the past 15 years, if you look at new schools where they're built, especially these infant schools, they have like 12-foot fences around them and gates. So they're getting them ready for gated communities, or in reality, the new Agenda 2030 Hive Mind concentration camps we're talking about at the beginning of the show. You know, the ones they're building in the Maldives, which is sinking. Well, it's just incredible. A corporate-backed brainwashing agenda for babies. There you go. Chairman Mao would be proud. Now, to finish off with, the 9/11 story and various cul-de-sacs of the mind is a great example of groupthink, isn't it? All these different theories about 9/11 and psychological manipulation that goes along with it. Not the official cover story, but the various layers of time wasters involved in challenging the official story, but just bringing in another fake narrative which combines a little bit of truth with a big lie. Now, this is quite interesting, actually, the way that this 9/11 has been used basically to throw people back into this cul-de-sac and not really get onto issues of real importance, which is how it was done, which is not being talked about really by any of the people in the 9/11 conspiracy community. They keep going back to Building 7, which is obviously a controlled demolition. That's obviously a controlled demolition. So you can see that straight away. So why do they keep going on about Building 7? It's a distraction. It says the resolution about this new 9/11 thing, right? And this is about architects and engineers for 9/11 truth. The resolution called for a new investigation due to the overwhelming evidence that pre-planted explosives caused the destruction of 3 World Trade Center buildings. Finally, after nearly 2 decades of ridicule, dismissal, and outright intolerance of information, contrary to the official story of what happened on 9/11, the public may finally learn the truth of what happened and who was behind it. No, they won't. Never. They haven't so far, and it's never going to come out. So it's a cul-de-sac. Per in Sweden made a comment here, which I really agree with this time. It says, in your dreams, he says, the cover-up of 9/11 is comprehensive and permanent, and it includes all these 9/11 truth outfits as controlled opposition. I'll submit there is a reason why architects and engineers for 9/11 truth have been focusing almost exclusively on Building 7. In the lingo of intelligence agencies, it's called a limited hangout, which is a cul-de-sac for the mind. This is the intellectual equivalent of a blind alley for crowd control. Now, I find this very interesting, this psychology behind the controlling of the narrative of these conspiracy theories. He says, basically, to render crowds of street protesters harmless, the best trick is to lure them into a blind alley, which, of course, is a great comparison. It's a great comparison to what they're doing here. When they go in there, they have no clue there's a brick wall at the end of the street. But once they're in, you've got them trapped in there. And that's how you neutralise the crowd. Basically, then they have to fight amongst each other with their conspiracy theories. Is it this? Is it the directed energy weapons? Is it this? Is it that? Is it the other? And none of these things ever finally get to a point, which, of course, is the point. Basically, you handcuff them and you arrest them and put them on bushes and ship them out. That's what you do in the end. That's what Peirce said here, but it says the limited hangout does the same thing with the mind. It's a rabbit hole type blind alley where you go in and spend a good many months or years exploring only to find out it's a dead end. How many people have done that? Incredible, isn't it? If you build the mind trap sufficiently opaque and complex, you can keep intelligent people struggling with it for years on end, and some of them never get out. Now, I know people who are still stuck in this. They go to a pub once a month and they still talk about this while their whole lives are being re-engineered around them. They're talking about something that's distant in the distant past that they think is the kind of central clue to everything. A newsflash, it's not anymore. It was, and it could still be if people put the right things together, but they're not allowing themselves to go in the right direction. It's like he says, take Building 7, for example. Yeah, you can see it's a controlled demolition within 10 seconds. Basically, then you can look at the seismographic charts, which clearly show a 2-hump pattern. First a large explosion shock, then a 5-second lull, then another 7-second percussion shock from the building hitting the ground. There's no question that this was a controlled demolition. So why are architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth keep banging on about it? Because they want to keep you in a cul-de-sac and a dead end. So the question is, why on earth has architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth spent more than 10 years on determining was it a controlled demolition? Well, we know why, don't we? Because it's never meant to get anywhere. So this is what we've got after 10 years and millions of dollars invested in this outfit and its 9/11 research. He says, I go into this. It is a textbook application of how to set up a limited hangout in practice. Architects and engineers are pushing authorities to admit that they covered up the controlled demolition of Building 7, but they are never asking why authorities should be so obstinate, why they keep lying about something so obvious. Well, also, this has been revealed even by Larry Silverstein, saying they were going to pull it. And the BBC gave the game away anyway, with Jane Stanley saying it had been demolished 23 minutes before it actually went down. This is all public. So all these limited hangouts do is they take you back into things that are already in the public domain. And that is one of the signs of counterintelligence, is when they use this stuff to throw you back into where you've come from. But yeah, that was good stuff from Per in Sweden there. But basically, just to finish off, I'd like to say that San Francisco has declared the NRA, the Rifle Association in America, a domestic terrorist organisation. It says the NRA has just been branded a domestic terrorist organisation by the San Francisco Board of Supervisors. The resolution then blames the NRA for using its considerable wealth and organisational strength to promote gun ownership and incite gun owners to acts of violence, which of course it's never done. It says, and accuses the organisation of spreading propaganda that misinforms and aims to deceive the public about the dangers of gun violence while promoting extremist positions. It doesn't do that. And the kicker, it says here, San Francisco says that the NRA, through its advocacy, has armed those individuals who would have committed acts of terrorism. Now, this is absolute slander. It's an absolutely disgusting thing, because look at it in this country. How many murders are committed with legal guns? How many? I think the last one may have been Tony Martin, the farmer who shot that burglar in the back as the burglar was leaving. The reason he got in prison because he shot the guy when he was leaving, not when he broke in. So he was already on his way out when this Tony Martin shot him in the back. Do you remember that? But the point is that he had a legal firearm, I believe. But if you go to gun violence in North London or any part of London or South London, you're not talking about registered weapons. So this is the logical fallacy of all this stuff, in that gun control only takes guns off people who have licenses, who are trusted to have them. So why are they trusted to have them? Basically because they need them. I know a farmer recently who's been disarmed, and he's a listener to the show. So if you're listening, Paul, hello. But he's had his guns taken off him with no excuse, and there's no recourse either. So I think we could probably leave it there, actually, for this week. Do remember to check the website out, because we've got loads of talks coming up, and we've even got one in Scotland, and that's in November. So do actually help us out by coming along to the bigger picture. Tell your friends about it, and please look at that latest article on windowsontheworld.net. UK venues who hate truth. And I've named them. The ones so far we have are the Hamblin Trust, the hamblincenter.org. And there's a phone call in there that you can listen to that I made to them, which they never got back to me on. And there's the Brighton venue, the Grand Central, which is a Fuller's pub, who acted despicably. So spread the word about these, and if you've got any more, we can add them to the list. There's quite a lot, obviously, out there, but I'm getting the ones on our hate list, because they're spreading hate by stopping us talking, so that we can name and shame them through Windows on the World. So that's great. Thanks a lot, everybody. I've got some really interesting stuff coming up that I've been putting together, and some historical shows. And yes, it's been quite a whirlwind this week. I've been doing a lot of filming. That's hence why I'm a little bit tired tonight. But there will be much more to come next week and during the week. So do please keep checking the website and take a look at that latest interview I did with Richard Willits from Glitching the Code. It's linked to windowsontheworld.net, and we're going to be covering the bigger picture of what I was talking about in that interview in the near future. So thanks a lot, everybody. That's it from me, and I'll see you next Sunday at 9. Join me, Mark Windows, for Windows on the World live every Sunday, 9 to 11 p.m. GMT. Check out our archive and program stream at windowsontheworld.net.